They gave me a book deal off just 5,000 words, which is insane. They basically committed to publishing this thing and they didn't know what it was going to be. There's a chapter where a guy has a piss. And that was the first thing I wrote. I was like, I'm going to cash out all the confidence on like just writing the most audacious stuff I can for a bit. It was just like, man, you give me the keys to the castle. I'm gonna storm through and do my thing.
I love that scene where it's like slow motion. There's so much going on and you're like, what is this? This is amazing. But also I think that really just introduced me to what a unique voice you are.
The goal is to be the best possible writer that could exist, right?
This week on Character Study, I'm joined by Sufiyaan Salam, a novelist and BAFTA-nominated screenwriter whose debut book, Wimmy Road Boys, won the Murky Book Prize.
Me and Lewis were texting about literally how cool it'd be to take our parents to the BAFTAs. I had a message from them saying, man, I want a BAFTA nom so I can take my dad. It's one of those things that when it happens, you're like, oh, cool, I can actually do that then. That's insane arrogance from me a few years ago has paid off.
He came to fiction from film, so he thinks about books the same way you'd think about a movie or a rap album.
Shakespeare's been king for 400, 500 years. Dude, at some point, someone's got to try and take him out.
How's your week been? What have you been up to? Did you have the Soho reading event already?
Yeah, that was last week, I think, or the week. I can't remember when it was. It was at some point last month. Yeah, that was great though. It was like on one of the hottest days. So when I turned up, I was like, man, I think probably no one's going to come to this. Because like a few people had messaged me having to drop out because of like heat related. And actually it was full. People had to stand. It was great. We had like great readers. I also, I did 2 readings. My last one I treated like a stand-up set. And it worked. Man, and there was a 90-minute signing queue. So I was like we were kicked out of the venue. I was still signing books. So that was nice.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, I love to hear that. Okay, well, I want to know what you read. What did you read for the bit that felt like stand-up?
Chapter 3, their cousin stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's so good. So you're a man of many talents. You're a screenwriter, you're a novelist now, you're also like a really talented artist. When you're at a party, how do you introduce yourself to people?
I just say my name, usually people will say the writing, I guess writer would be the thing. But usually people say it for me. I'll just be like real quiet and let someone else say. But yeah, I think writer is what I am.
What was the point at which you felt like, oh yeah, I'm really a writer? Or do you feel like ever since you've been writing, that's just been who you are? Was there any external validation you needed to feel that?
Weirdly, yeah. So many writers, I guess I hear, they say there was a certain thing that had to happen for them to call themselves a writer. I weirdly I was like, yeah, I write, so I must be one. And yeah, ever since I was a kid, I was making up stories and writing stuff, either with toys or with like cousins as actors in scripts I was writing. But yeah, no, for me, it was more being able to say it to other people was a big thing. I was always like I was a writer in my mind, and I'd share writing with a couple of friends, but I was always, the idea of taking it seriously as a professional thing in the real world as a dream, that took time to be comfortable with. I think it was literally just doing it I did English literature at uni. I did a screenwriting course, like a module, and I did that basically because I was like, well, I know how to write scripts, and so I'll probably, as coursework, I'll probably get first, and it was like it wasn't necessarily chosen out of passion beyond just, oh, I'm good at this, so it'll be easy. But then I already liked screenwriting, but I loved the class of it and the workshopping. And I think from that and the encouragement from sort of peers and the tutor, I was like, oh man, actually, maybe there is a world where I can like do this as an actual for my life. And it isn't just some secret thing I'm doing at my desk and no one knows about. So that was maybe that moment.
What kind of films were you making when you were young? You said you were making films with toys.
There's a few different things. There was some were like imagined films where I had all these Doctor Who action figures. You won't be able to see it, but I've actually got a pretty cool David Tennant Invisible one on the bookshelf. Anyway, I'd have these Doctor Who toys, but I'd tell my own stories with them as if I'm just like role playing almost. And sometimes I try to do stop motion with it, but it was like telling my own science fiction stories. And then, yeah, as a kid, man, I remember it was my granddad's funeral, and me and my cousins were all in the same house, my grandma's house, the first time in a while. We were like, let's just make a movie. So we made, using a laptop webcam, we made a High School Musical sort of parody. or like a rip-off maybe. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, it was a musical set in a high school. My cousins had American accents whilst we were doing it. We had musical numbers. It was great. And then I had a YouTube channel where I was making like comedy sketches and little short films as a teenager, which was fun. I mean, a lot of it was, there was a video I made that everyone loved at school. It did really well, and also got me into controversy because I'd like basically had a maths teacher character in the video who was slightly inspired by a real maths teacher who no one liked. But it was real smart. I didn't say his name or anything. But it was just a certain teacher. And it kind of made me a legend in school. But also this teacher then, there's a whole thing where he tried to get it deleted and call my parents in. I had other teachers who were telling me how much they'd show the video to their students. It was when I realized the power of filmmaking.
My God, you were being censored by the school, but the school, the teachers loved it. Does that channel still exist?
Hopefully. I think it's all privated. Super lucky that it wasn't like a TikTok type thing where you can just randomly go viral. Luckily, it just got to be, I built up a small community of like friends and filmmakers through it, but it got to just be like hanging out with friends doing stuff instead of this, oh my God, I got 1 million followers and I'm 16. I did meet my collaborator Lewis Hinman, who we did the short film Majid Zafar together. We literally met through YouTube. He used to make YouTube short films. We met when we were like 15, 16, and it's just one of those things that from YouTube to now, man, it's not just all Obsession and Backrooms, it's us as well.
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen Obsession? What do you think about it? It's exciting that people from YouTube are now suddenly having like features, and that's how you met Lewis.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen Obsession yet. I saw Backrooms, which I didn't love, but I thought it was cool. I'm more interested in this sort of, like Sorry Baby. She was also, I don't know if she's from YouTube, but she was an internet creator. I think that's the exciting thing is, there's this whole new visual language or like people who've come from a slightly different way of having to hustle in the industry. And that's pretty exciting because I was having to market my stuff as a 15-year-old, make thumbnails and stuff. And so I think it helps when I got a book to sell or I've got a film that you're trying to do an awards campaign yourself for. It's like, well, I'll just do what I was doing when I was a teenager and just did all DIY, do it yourself.
That's really empowering. We'll come on to your short film, but I'm really interested in your High School Musical parody. It sounds amazing. Do you think that when you were creating that, do you think part of you was feeling sad about what was going on downstairs and you were like, okay, I'm going to take everybody and make them feel happy. I'm going to like distract us. Or was it more like you wanted to bring people together? You and your cousins, you were messing around. It sounds like you were quite cheeky, but also I guess the validation that you were getting from how good your videos were, that must have been really addictive as a young person.
Yeah, man, that's such a good question. I can't, it's funny that whole grief thing with my gran, it was an odd one because it was the first like real death in the family. And also Michael Jackson died a month after. And I know for sure I displaced the grief onto, I didn't even care about Michael Jackson I didn't know him that much beyond Thriller's a banger. Weirdly, I put that, I just remember as a 10-year-old or whatever, putting that grief onto Michael Jackson, because that felt like, well, everyone's grieving. So this is easy. I think a lot of artists are people whose like parents didn't listen to them, or, I feel like memories of like, oh man, I got told off for this thing, but I didn't do it and no one believed me. I was quite shy as a kid. And a thing I could do was make a film and then we'd like sit down as a family or like with extended family, just have the laptop on a table and everyone would watch and everyone was nice. I think that's, you're always chasing that thing of, it's quite nice that, I think it just gave me a sense of self, and also it's like nice being validated. I had a short play that was put on in 2020, which was like my first thing in front of like a real audience. And my main takeaway from that was, man, it was cool that there was an audience laughing and clapping and stuff. I was like, damn, I got to chase this because it's cool.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling. Tell me a little bit about your short film. I watched it today and I loved it. It's so stylish and exciting, and my heart was racing the whole time, and then I felt like my heart completely stopped. Can you tell me a little bit about the story for your BAFTA-nominated short film?
Yeah, it's cool. Man, I love the qualifier BAFTA nominated for it. Because sometimes, you mention you got a short film to someone and they're just imagining, oh, okay, just another person with a short film and it's something I'm going to have to be forced to watch. So I always love when people describe it as BAFTA nominated, because it makes it feel it makes it feel more legit. Look, man, I just need that validation. But yeah, the film. I mean, I'm glad you know the thing about it being sort of fun and stressful, and then heartbreaking. As you know from the book, it's a story shape I like. But I mean, the thing with that film was beyond just wanting to make something cool. But my whole creative philosophy is just I like thinking about audiences and kind of giving this as much of a maximalist experience as possible. I like the idea of like Scorsese said this disparagingly about the Marvel films, where he said they're like roller coaster rides. But I feel like, one, a lot of the Marvel films kind of aren't that interesting. Apart from Thunderbolts, shout out Thunderbolts, underrated. But like the Scorsese films are sort of roller coaster rides in a cool way. He's like shoving things in front of your face. He's doing crazy music cues, and you know, I'm interested in that kind of filmmaking. That's real, like, you know, throwing everything at the wall. Really trying to like not just be there for an audience, and also like play with an audience's expectations, and be fun until you're not being fun, and to use every like tool at your disposal to tell the story and get us into the character's headspace. And also, man, just being able to shoot, like we designed that takeaway doesn't exist in real life. We filmed it in a Chinese takeaway that's pretty bare bones, and we had incredible designers sort of make the thing look like, you know, a Pakistani restaurant we wanted it to look like. And so we got to have a thing that was we got to have a restaurant that just looked incredible and was packed full of texture and color. So many of like my childhood or family photos are like stuck around the restaurant, and same with Lewis. It's like the Pakistani cricket shirt hanging up in a frame in the background. Picture of my dad, which is massive. It was cool just creating a space that for us was like, that's been a Pakistani takeaway has been a part of my childhood for, you know, since I was a kid. And it was cool to be able to translate that experience into what I think is a cool film, but also, just make it like a fun cinematic sort of experience in the same way that like Diamond District in Uncut Gems is like a super visceral cinematic experience, or you know, like Hong Kong in like some of Wong Kar-wai's films, like so specific and just cool and entertaining. And I wanted to do that for a space I hadn't seen that done much with.
Yeah, being specific is a really important writing tool, but also I guess just for any visual art, and the way you do that, like you say, with the shots on the wall, the photos, also the texture that you have through this amazing like green kind of glass curtain that you have that's then like shimmering between their eyes as they're looking at each other through the door. It's fantastic. How do you try and always be specific in all the creative avenues that you have? How are you always trying to like drill down into details?
I think a lot of it is thinking about stereotypes that are, you know, negative or they're just pervasive, and just thinking on one, what's actually, you know, a lot of stereotypes are true and also not like terrible, but also just thinking about what's the truth behind something. So even actually just before I joined this call, I was writing something where I needed there to just be some old uncles kind of sat down on a chair, and it was just them reading a newspaper, which is, sure, that's like image. And then it's like, well, how do I push that even further? Okay, it can be a specific, there's a specific Pakistani newspaper. There can be chewing pan, which is kind of a sort of like Pakistani origin. I don't know what it is. A weird thing that you can chew and spit out. It's almost like, I guess it's sort of like smoking. You know, or like a scene I was writing where it's I just needed a shot of an Asian mother putting on her makeup, and I was like, man, it's actually more interesting if she's putting on henna on her hands. And it's the same, the idea is the same. She's someone getting ready, but suddenly you're drilling down and making the thing slightly more specific. Eyeliner is cool, but actually there's something more culturally specific and also just visually more interesting if she's putting a cool henna thing on her hand. Just going over the same things again and again. What am I missing? What can I do better? And just like trying to soak up a reality as well.
And it's really interesting whenever I hear you talk about your art, because I love the amount of detail or the levels of involvement that you have in everything. And I know with your book, you were like organizing a photo shoot for the cover, and then there's lots of like text within the book that you're doing as well. Do you have any advice for people that are in any kind of creative discipline, but they feel like there's a boundary to what they can be involved in? Like, I think most authors think, well, I can't design the cover for my book. Or some screenwriters might think, I can't decide what's on the wall of my film. But you've always pushed that. What gives you that kind of like confidence?
On both things, with the film and the book cover or the book in general, is I know I'm operating with, there's a director who I completely trust and art team and so on who are just like have a great vision. And same with the book. The designer on this, Zara, was just like just a genius and has such a great vision. So one, I think partly knowing that the thing was in good hands anyway helps, because then you're almost like I can sort of say anything that comes to mind. And like, if it's bad, there's a filter. You're not gonna put a terrible idea in the film or on the book cover, right? But if it's good, then it's good. There's some sort of creative Darwinism at play. I try and always think about my opinions in terms of, like, I've never designed a book cover before. And like, probably if I just designed a cover from scratch with no input, it'd be terrible. But I do have opinions on book covers. Like, every time I go into a bookstore, I'm thinking about, and I have been thinking about for years, what I think looks good, what looks terrible, what's like a book that sounds good, and I see the cover and I'm like, I'll just never read you because this is disgusting. I think it's good to have, for me anyway, good to have an inner voice that is quite harsh with some of that stuff, because it means even on a level of the quotes on the book, I had certain like strong opinions about quotes I'd seen on other books where I'm like, oh man, I feel like this quote they've chosen is just not really selling this book in a good way, or blah, blah, blah. It's making me think this other thing. All power to these other books, but it's just useful for me to know what I want. So I just was constantly keeping note of things that I felt on a visceral level would be terrible, or like what would be really cool to do, what's maybe not been done before. It's more about just being aware of what your taste is and knowing kind of what you want. I think it's a good idea to have like a vision. The original cover I ever envisioned for this book, which is more abstract, I didn't ever have a fully concrete idea of what it looked like. But it's probably different to the cover we've ended up with. But I can't imagine that would have been better than what we've got. It's just, you're trying to push where you can to make something cooler. And then you've got people who are hopefully pushing to make a thing even cooler. Man, like there's no point having imposter syndrome with these things. If I say a dumb opinion, then it's like it's embarrassing for a few minutes, and then you get over it. So it's worth me saying something that might be dumb, just in case the thing I say is actually good and make something better.
I love the cover for your book. It's amazing. Can you describe it for our listeners?
First off, in the middle of the book, we've got 3 brown guys. Their faces are slightly obscured with sort of like ballys and face masks that have sort of been cut out of the picture, if that makes sense. The text is in this kind of old Englishy style, typeface, red and white are the dominant colors, which might remind you of a certain flag, but we've got a bit of green in there as well, which is reminiscent of the Pakistani flag. There's sort of paper texture and rips, and also Arabic writing that my dad did, which says Bismillah, which is sort of like a prayer for beginning. Like in Islam, if you're about to begin a task, or if you're about to start reading the Quran or whatever it is, you'd say Bismillah. So it's kind of a cool little thing. To contrast that, one of the guys is smoking weed. Oh, he's smoking something. We don't know what he's smoking, but if you read the book, he's probably smoking weed.
We couldn't possibly say. Yeah, I love it. There's so much texture in it. And I think that really comes back to like your filmmaking style as well. Before we talk more about the book, I just want to ask you like what it was like to be at the BAFTAs. I think if I remember correctly, you said you took your dad with you. And that kind of reminded me of what you were saying about being that young person looking for validation, being like, come watch this film I've got. And now, you're an adult, very successful, being able to take your dad to the BAFTA. Like, that's amazing.
Before we'd even finished the first draft of the short film, so this is early 2023, when there's no one attached to fund this thing. There's just you have no idea what's going to happen. All I knew for sure was nothing of mine had ever been funded before. But me and Lewis were texting about literally how cool it'd be to take our parents to the BAFTAs. I had a message from then saying, man, I want a BAFTA nom so I can take my dad. It's one of those things that when it happens, you're like, oh, cool, I can actually do that then. That's insane, insane arrogance from me a few years ago has paid off. Yeah, it was cool. I mean, the actual 2026 BAFTAs is slightly complicated for, I'm sure if if you read the news at the time, you sort of understand, but it was cool. It was cool to be there. I got to, speak to, there's a bunch of like heroes, like the Ryan Coogler or the dude who edited The Social Network. I had like a crazy long conversation with that guy. My dad was more, he loved just being able to see like Cat from The Traitors and these different people he knew from TV. He was like loving that. He didn't even come to my flat in the morning. He was like, nah, I'll just chill around here to find some celebrities. A few days before the BAFTA ceremony, there was this celebrating South Asians at the BAFTAs event, which is really cool. And there was like the cast of Goodness Gracious Me were there. Aziz Ansari was there randomly, and Nikesh Shukla, and some of these like legends who've either grown up with or I love their work. I went there as it's cool to be invited. And then someone asked me if I'd prepared a speech. I was like, why? And they were like, well, we're celebrating your team. And there was two other films that were South Asian in origin that were also nominated that year. But it's just this, okay. So I'm not just a guest here. I'm actually meant to be on stage for a little bit. So that was cool. And it was just cool because there's all these legends, like I'm saying, that I've grown up with, who in any other situation, I'd be trying to find them to talk to them. And they were coming to me or Lewis or the rest of we had a lot of our cast and crew there and like telling us how much they liked the film. And that is like it's still like a thing I haven't processed. And like, that was like beyond anything else. That was like cool.
Oh, so moments like that are just such dreams comes true that it's just like hard to ever process it. We've joked before a little bit about kind of like film screening culture and how people put their hands up and be like, more of a comment than a question, and just kind of go on a ramble. What was people's reaction to your film, and did you get any questions that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's been really nice. It's a weird thing when your absolute impossible dream for a film kind of comes true. And it's a weird one because I'm super grateful, and also it's so unexpected as well. Like the film only premiered in October last year, so it's still quite new to the world. It's had more screenings in the last couple of months than ever before. But now it's just out in the world doing its own thing. But there's been a lot of nice messages from people who, have either never seen that specific story being told or who really resonate with the characters or who just think it's cool. I've noticed the difference between like book events and film events is some film screenings you'll have like real kind of like, you'll get like people being way more rude in a question, whereas so far book audience has been way nicer, so that's like an interesting thing to like have to deal with. But yeah, largely it's been pretty cool.
Why do you think that is? What's the rudest thing anyone said to you at film screening?
Well, someone once said that the Pakistani restaurant having a Pakistani flag was inauthentic, which I think is insane as a comment is just weird because like some restaurants do have flags. I don't, it's such a random, maybe the one you go to doesn't, is what an odd thing to say. Honestly, just so unnecessary. I don't know why there's a difference. It might just be book stuff's newer, but I couldn't say why. But or maybe there's an immediacy with films where you watch it in a screening and it's like 15 minutes long, whereas a book you have to actually spend hours of your life with. So if you're coming to a book event, you've either not read the book yet, or you have, and I guess you care about it enough that you've sunk hours of your life into it. And now you've come into an event. So maybe it's that.
Yeah, I wonder if it's that sometimes people want to be congratulated for their observations sometimes, I feel, in a film audience. I'm always kind of like half there when you go to a Q&A at the BFI just to hear people's insane comments. So yeah, that's always a bit funny. But let's talk more about your book. I love your book. I feel like I haven't read anything like it. It's so incredibly original in its form. It feels like it's part script, it's part rap, it's part poetry. What kind of atmosphere did you want to create when you were thinking about the style that you were going to evoke for your book?
Really, on a basic level, I wanted it to feel like a rap album. I just thought that something like Kendrick's Good Kid, Mad City, where that album is just this huge cinematic experience. It's super fun and entertaining. it had its hits like swimming pools and so on, and the poetic justice with Drake, but also it had these moments of complete kind of darkness as well, and bits of light and hope, and just full of texture. Like you can listen to that album and have no lived experience of sort of coming up in Compton in the time that Kendrick did, but yeah, like you still there was a feeling of, oh, I feel like I'm there.
Hello, it's me, Freya, just letting you know that you can now buy my debut novel, A Real Piece of Work. It's a book about sisters, complicated families, and what happens to grief when it becomes a collective experience. You can now buy A Real Piece of Work wherever you buy your books, and if you go in store to Foyles, you'll receive a limited edition cotton bandana while stocks last. If you prefer to listen to your books, then you can get it as an audiobook. Happy reading. Maybe you can start by describing the book. I know that's always the worst question when someone's like, tell me what your book's about, but tell me a little bit about Wimmy Road Boys.
Wimmy Road Boys is, follows three young British Muslim guys on a crazy night out in Manchester, specifically on Winslow Road, which is known as Manchester's Curry Mile. And yeah, man, they get up to all sorts of drama, and things go wrong. And yeah, they're sort of, all three of them are repressing sort of different kind of emotional traumas or sort of heartbreaks and so on, and the more they keep these things repressed, the more sort of these things are loudly going to come out later on in the book.
I love how much of the tension is based on this coming of age drama of this tension of the men that they want to become, but feeling this barrier between them and the rest of the, feeling like their destiny is out of their control a little bit, but also not being able to talk to each other. They're so close, they've known each other for so long, but there's a real difficulty to open up. Is that something that you relate to?
On one level, I guess I've never been outside my own head, so I don't know what it's like for other people, but I think there's something personally so interesting about this idea of being trapped in a situation where there's these things I wish I could just say because maybe the burden will be eased, but I feel like I can't, or I feel like if I do, suddenly it becomes real, or like it's going to be embarrassing or whatever it is. So one, there was that, and also it just for me something interesting in taking what is maybe feels like a universal male kind of coming of age story in terms of on the journey to becoming kind of the man you're going to be. There's trials and tribulations, but also this having to shed the sort of immature, hurt little boy that you are as well, and being unable to properly communicate this to those around you, destroying relationships because you're unable to communicate this stuff. And on the destiny thing, it was super interesting for me because I was writing from there's this interesting for me Islamic point of view of actually if you're writing characters who are Muslim, then there's this idea of a kind of predestined plan, or like a divine plan that is just in play, which I think is super interesting for dramatic reasons as well. But also, if you're a young Muslim or a Muslim living in Britain at the time, or indeed like a plethora of minorities, there's this feeling of, man, I don't know what this country is going to even be in a few years, and certainly things have been heating up. As I was writing this, race riots were sort of exploded, and that's why they've become part of the book. It's just happening in real life. So there's this interesting thing of, man, actually, I can, as a man, there's this destiny, and Islamically, there's this destiny. And also there's just, if you're a minority in this country, there's a specific vision of what Britain might become that feels nightmarish and that is just ahead and hanging over everyone, sort of, hanging over us like a sword of Damocles. And I was like, man, that just, beyond anything else, it's just so easy to dramatize that and make, you can make the thing fun and entertaining and all these other things. But ultimately, there's like in terms of the structure of the book, you get to do guys hanging out and it's brown hangover, and then it gets to slowly become more shaped like a bullet. Where it's like, we're going towards a specific, we're in a car and we're speeding up and we can't get out, and we're heading towards a specific kind of a destiny. And to me, that was just fun.
The car is such a fantastic narrative device because it's just able to propel us so much forwards throughout the story. They're getting getting off into different places, whether that's going in to have food or they like suddenly like stumble into a protest. So there's constantly so much like action and movement in the story. Did you always have the car being at the center of the story, or was that something that you kind of stumbled upon and it really worked for your story?
Yeah, I think it was. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was always there was always a the initial idea for this book was three British Muslim guys on a night out, and they're unable to talk about kind of what's going on in their hearts. But I think very quickly the idea, the Curry Mile is kind of known for, I mean, beyond just the endless incredible food spots and shisha bars and so on. There's a culture of not just men, but young British Asian men driving up and down, like we always call it doing laps on Wimmy Road. So if you're ever down there on sort of Eid Day or one of the Independence Days or whatever, you'll just see incredible cars. Some that people own, some are just souped up sort of hire cars. This is like a different vision of a British night out, but it's still just as, for me, just as British and just as, well, actually maybe dramatically more interesting. It's like a canon experience for like, I guess, me and the people I grew up with, just driving up and down endlessly and sort of aimlessly this one street and getting into mischief.
There's so much mischief. I love it. I feel so warmly towards the boys in this book. I feel like they're my friends by the end of the book too as well now. I read something where you said that you wanted your writing to feel both like Shakespearean and also like a Jay-Z lyric. How do you manage the style of your writing? Because you have sections in your book that feel like rap, some feel like poetry. I love the sections that you have where you're using like script and screenwriting. How do you balance all of that yet still manage to make it feel really cohesive?
It just felt true to me and these characters, and I think we live in a world where you're constantly interacting with a million different mediums. Even just the experience of scrolling through like Instagram stories, for example, you're greeted with some song someone's put on as they're running, some kind of like horrible news story, some like someone's at the cinema, someone's like doing with family, and you're sort of like within a few seconds just treated to like a whole gamut of like human experiences. So for me, it just always felt like this is how you tell this story, is you just put everything in it. And the Jay-Z Shakespeare thing, I mean, actually where it came from was there's a few things. One, I saw Iannucci's David Copperfield movie with Dev Patel a few years ago, which is, obviously set in the Victorian times, incredible, but also there's without necessarily, it's not on a language level, but the film feels very contemporary as well, the way it's shot. It's maybe not that different to a kind of thick of its sort of style. So it feels very contemporary, but it's still Victorian and sounds Victorian. I remember coming out of that film and thinking it'd be cool to write something that's sort of in a more highfalutin classical style, like a Dickens thing or a Shakespeare thing, but also feels very contemporary and fast-paced and so on. Because I guess that's what Shakespeare stuff was at the time. It's like, I don't know, it's like the EastEnders of its day or whatever. So, if you're a Shakespearean audience, you're watching whatever Midsummer Night's Dream. You're not watching something that feels super old and stuffy or whatever. You're seeing some brand new, like interesting thing that's pushing form. Pushing the form in an interesting way. So I guess for me, there was just this thing of, actually I can mix this kind of language with the slang I use with the boys and kind of like have sentences that are as inspired by rap lyrics as they are by, I don't know, James Joyce. I grew up on a bunch of Bollywood films. I love maximalist stuff. I just think, man, you're not on this earth for too long. So the most fun for me is putting everything in. And I never really worried about a sense of cohesiveness in a way, because it just felt like it was always honest. For me, the start of the book is just not a gimmick at any point. And it wasn't like I sat down and wrote down, right, there's going to be 10 places where suddenly we go into sort of screenplay format. It was always just what the certain scenes just demanded. There's certain scenes where, there's a bit where we're in a bar and the three guys are sort of separate for a bit. And for me, the only way to tell that is to literally bounce between them using camera language, how you'd describe a camera moving, partly just dramatic effect. This guy's about to do something crazy. Oh no, we're going to whip towards this other guy now. But also it's just that's how I imagined it. It's like I can see it like that. So let's just write it like that.
Yeah, and as a reader, we're like, okay, well, I'll follow you. Suddenly I'm sat up and I'm paying attention because the tone of the book has changed and it feels really exciting. But there's also a total guiding within the style because, like you say, I guess it feels very honest. I suppose that's really good writing advice is like, are you having fun and are you being honest? And if so, then just carry on. I also remember last time we were speaking about writing, you were saying that the bravado that rappers have is actually really inspiring. And the way that rappers talk about their own writing, like their own work and wanting to be the best, is very different to how writers talk about their work. Why do you think that's different? And which do you kind of relate to more?
Thing I've just observed for like years of it's just so easy to talk about writing as this, oh man, I'm like a struggle and no one cares, and people are very downbeat about that work in a way that like I'm not that interested in reading your work if you're like not, and not that you have to be super in love with everything you do, but I think there's something about like if you're not gonna even attempt to make me excited about this book because you are such a strong, no one care. Why am I going to care? Again, when I was saying with the short film, I like care about an audience. I actually think it has to be real as well. I'm not like putting on an act, but I think it's good to be like happy with your work and to strive. Certain things. It's not guaranteed that you're going to like love your work or whatever all the time. But I do think, for me, I just think there's no point if it isn't fun. And also, I'm trying to craft an experience that, as for all the kind of heartbreak and difficult moments that the book has, for me, ultimately, it's got to be a fun experience that is entertaining, that is like paced. You want to turn the page, and chapters are kind of short and so on. But yeah, I love the attitude rappers have, and it isn't, it's steeped in our traditions as well with like the romantics, for example, were like so full of themselves and their knowledge and so on. And the real version of you in like when you're just around normal people and you're just like in your life, maybe temper it then. But if I'm talking from the point of view of a writer, then I'm like, look, the goal is to be the best possible writer that could exist, right? There's like a certain arrogance by you're talking in a Guardian interview about wanting to make the book feel like Shakespeare and Jay-Z, but it is what I wanted. And I feel like, look, Shakespeare's been king for 400, 500 years and probably will be for thousands more. But I'm like, dude, at some point, someone's got to try and take him out. And that's like, I'm not saying that would be me, but it's like, for me, it's a worthy exercise. And like, actually, can I try and beat the guy at some point? That'd be cool. Yeah, I guess I care about writing and I care about pointing out the best work possible. And so when I'm in the writing, I'm trying to be arrogant and have that bravado to just make the sentences as good as possible, to make the thing sort of to take risks and like crazy leaps. And then you go back and you edit it. I think Tyler the Creator said recently, create like a child and edit like a scientist. And I like that. But I'm like, I'm trying to have the childlike wonder as I'm making something. Because also making stuff's fun. There's way more useful jobs I could do in the world. I try and be a doctor or immigration lawyer or something. I'm doing this thing that's, it's hard sometimes to write, but it's hard to do lots of things. This is fun ultimately, to be able to put stuff out there. Someone's willing to publish it. People are reading it. It's like, own that, it's cool.
So Kanye West and Lord Byron are not that different then?
Yeah, I mean, I literally had a uni lecture where the lecturer, he drew a line from Byron, I think it was Wordsworth, but basically Byron and to Kanye West. It was like, look, this is what those guys are doing, man. So yeah, just do it.
Speaking of musicians, you won the Murky New Writers Prize. What did that feel like to have that kind of advocate and patron for your writing? And that was before the book came out, right? So you did a short amount of writing, then won the prize, and then had to finish the book.
I'd submitted 5,000 words, basically. I think I maybe had 7,000 or 8,000 words of the actual novel. So it's basically, most of it hadn't been written. And I knew vaguely what I wanted the ending to be, but so much of what appears in the book, I hadn't even thought of yet. You're really just winning the lottery with that. There's like so many submissions. I know the writers who were shortlisted the year we have a little group chat. I had some confidence in what I had, and then I went to this writers camp we had before they announced the winner, where you got to meet the other shortlisted writers, and you're like, oh man, you guys are all good. Everyone's books are so different, but like everyone has a voice and is interesting, and their thing is at some point will just turn into like an incredible work that's published. One, it was just off the back of the prize. It's just cool to finally meet other authors, which I didn't really know any before. But also, yeah, the winning that was, again, like I was saying, it's a lottery ticket in a way. But it gave me, one, it just gave me a deadline to finish the thing, which was useful. I was still working another job full time, and I had other projects on the go. So I was like super busy that year. I probably wouldn't have finished a novel if I didn't have like a reason to. And yeah, also, I got to sign with my agent off the back of winning that, which is cool. Signed to the best agent in the game, which is again, incredibly lucky thing that came out of it. But also just this, they gave me a book deal off just 5,000 words, which is insane. They basically committed to publishing this thing, and they didn't know what it was going to be, and no one knew what the ending was going to be. Again, the first chapter I wrote after winning that was, there's a chapter where a guy has a piss, and that was the first thing I wrote in sort of in a cafe in Manchester. And I was like, I'm going to cash out all the confidence on like just writing the most audacious stuff I can for a bit. It was just like, man, you give me the keys to the castle. I'm gonna storm through and do my thing. And that was like press stuff 2 years ago for the book, which is insane and like is not a normal thing that you get. And I was super grateful for it. It's prepped me for having a book out in the world, because I've had a couple of years of doing events with Murky Books or off the back of it. My first reading of this book was literally 2 years ago, which is crazy because I read from the first chapter before my editor had ever even seen the first chapter. Well, I guess she'd seen it in the Murky Book submission, but like it was like super raw and whatever. And I read it in front of an audience and it went well, but only now do I think, man, that's crazy. But it's cool because now I do readings and I'm like, yeah, I guess that's a thing I've been doing for years now, even though the book's only just come out.
It's an amazing journey. And I love that scene where it's like slow motion, taking a piss, and there's so much going on. And you're like, what is this? This is amazing. But also, I think that really just introduced me to what a unique voice you are. And I find it very inspiring reading your writing, the risks that you're taking. And it really just makes me think, why am I feeling the limits of form that I do? And actually hearing you speak about how you feel about confidence, and like, rather than having that process and feeling it to be pressure that you had to then go and write this whole book, you were like, great, what an amazing endorsement of my writing. I'm going to go and be the best. Like, I wonder what I would write and how that would be different if I was going to sit down with that attitude and be like, I'm already the best. I just need to like finish the book.
I just think it's super useful. You owe it to yourself sometimes. Because I was aware there'd be an audience for this, at least, the thing is just getting published. So like some people will just read it at least, It's like a crazy amount of pressure. But for me, it's like, look, when you get these opportunities, you sort of like have no choice but to seize it. Everyone has like some friendship that kind of they fell out, or some relationship, something that you can be petty about. It's like, like if this person has to see that I've got a book, let it be on all these lists and stuff, And I think there's like, it's good to tap into petty and, these people at school didn't take my like writing seriously. So now I'm going to have billboards in Manchester, whatever, you never know that this stuff's going to happen. But I think it's useful to tap into the evil energy you have as well. It's something like, certain illegal activities to do with plants have like taught me is like you can to some extent adjust your subjective experience a little bit, and like, man, maybe this is super stressful and terrible, but what if it wasn't? Like, what if the process of writing a book was easy instead of hard? There's a moment where I knew I had maybe about 50,000 words to write in like summer 2024. Whilst the job at the time was super busy and I was moving from Manchester to London and all these things going on. And it was like, look, this is either going to be the most stressful period of my life, or what if it was just easy? And it's not like it was, but my memory of it now is that it was, because I was just trying to like stay positive about it. And like, if I was ever writing and it felt like a chore, maybe it isn't good enough, and the insecurities that you have, it's like, okay, I'll listen to you. Maybe, yeah, you're right, it's not good. Now let me figure out how I can make it incredible. Or sometimes it's, I'll write something I think is good. I'm like, but what if it's bad and I had to now make it good? What would I do? It's like these little tricks you can just play with yourself.
Yeah, it's so mental. I love the image of you sitting down to desk, like rubbing your hands, like, hee, who am I going to get revenge on today? Thank you so much, Sufiyaan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.